The hall was glowing. Pink and blue balloons, laughter, cameras flashing. Everyone was celebrating their babies, or so she thought. Her husband stood beside her, smiling just enough for the pictures. But when the music paused, he cleared his throat and handed her an envelope. Right there, in front of family and friends. Divorce papers, gasps, silence. Her hands trembled. He smirked. "Don't make a scene," he whispered coldly. "You'll be fine without me." She swallowed her pain, forced a smile, and took the mic. "Since we're making announcements," she said softly. The crowd leaned in. Even he looked curious. Her next words made his jaw drop, and the entire room erupt. "What do you think she said?" "Hello, family. Welcome back. Before we begin, I have a small but heartfelt request. Please subscribe. Your support is what keeps these stories alive. Every time you click that button, you're helping us share voices that would otherwise be forgotten and stories that deserve to be heard. And in the comments, tell us where you're watching from, because together we are not just telling stories, we are keeping hope alive." The morning sun spilled through the tall windows of the Moore mansion, touching everything in gold. The marble floors, the glass vases, the wide staircase that gleamed like a movie set. But inside that glow, Olivia Moore felt cold. Her reflection in the hallway mirror didn't look like her anymore. The girl who once laughed freely, who dreamed of a cozy family and love that didn't hurt, that girl was gone. In her place stood a woman with tired eyes, 7 months pregnant, wearing a designer dress that didn't fit her heart. From downstairs came the sound of Margaret's voice, sharp, polished, filled with disapproval. "If you're going to represent this family, Olivia, you could at least learn how to sit properly." "You're slouching again." Olivia touched her belly and stood straighter. "Yes, Margaret," she said softly. Margaret's lips curved into what might have been a smile if it had any warmth. "At least you listen," she said. "That's more than I can say for your people." "My people?" Olivia repeated, though she already knew what that meant. "Working class manners," Margaret said, waving her hand as if the word itself were beneath her. "You don't host charity dinners with casserole recipes and hand-me-down smiles. You need grace, my dear. Real grace." Olivia said nothing. She'd learned silence was safer. Margaret leaned closer, lowering her voice. "You're lucky my son married you. I told him better, but Daniel always did have a soft spot for strays." The words hit like ice. Olivia forced a smile. "I'll try to be a better stray." Margaret's eyes narrowed. "Watch your tone, dear." Just then, Daniel walked in. Tall, perfect suit, his hair slicked back like he was born for magazine covers. He looked at his wife and then at his mother. "What's going on here?" he asked, sounding more bored than curious. "Nothing," Margaret said quickly. "Just reminding Olivia of her presentation." Daniel's eyes drifted over Olivia, from her swollen belly to her bare feet. "You should dress up more," he said. "We have guests later." "I can't wear heels anymore, Daniel," she said quietly. "The doctor said—" "Doctors exaggerate. My mother walked in heels until the day I was born." Margaret smiled proudly. "That's right. A woman who wants to look her best will find a way." Olivia wanted to scream, but instead she said softly, "I'll change." Daniel nodded, satisfied. "Good. Samantha will be here too. She's bringing some people from the foundation." Her heart froze at the name Samantha. Her best friend, her maid of honor, the woman now showing up at her husband's side. Margaret clapped her hands once. "Wonderful. Samantha's such a delight. So elegant. Such class." Olivia turned away, pretending to fix a vase, hiding the sting behind a polite smile. In the reflection of the glass, she saw Daniel check his phone, smiling at a message. She didn't need to guess who it was from. That night, the dinner party unfolded like a play. The chandelier lights shimmered, and laughter bounced off the walls. Olivia smiled when she was supposed to, nodded when people spoke to her, and poured champagne she couldn't drink. And there, next to her husband, sat Samantha. She looked radiant, in a gold dress that caught every light. Her manicured hand rested comfortably on Daniel's arm, as if it belonged there. "Olivia," Samantha said sweetly, "you look so glowing." Pregnancy really suits you, Olivia smiled. Thank you. You look happy, Samantha's eyes flickered. I am, she said with the kind of confidence that made the words sting harder. Across the table, Daniel chuckled at something Samantha whispered. Olivia couldn't hear it, but she didn't have to. His smile, the one she hadn't seen in months, said enough. Margaret raised her glass. To Daniel, she said proudly, for his success, his leadership, and his taste in both business and company. Everyone laughed. Everyone but Olivia. She held her glass steady, her knuckles white. When dinner was over, she slipped outside for air. The night was cool. The city lights shimmered below the mansion's balcony. She placed a hand on her belly and whispered, I'm sorry, babies. I'm trying. I promise. I'm trying. Behind her, the sliding door opened. Daniel stepped out, holding a drink. There you are, he said, leaning against the railing. You disappeared. I needed air, she said softly. He studied her. You embarrassed my mother tonight. I did nothing. You were quiet. People notice when you're quiet. It makes them uncomfortable, Olivia turned to him. Then maybe they should stop saying things that deserve silence. His expression darkened. Watch it. She met his eyes for the first time all evening. You brought her here. My best friend. You think that doesn't make me uncomfortable? Daniel took a slow sip. You should be grateful I didn't leave you sooner, he said calmly. At least I'm being honest now. Olivia's voice trembled, but she didn't look away. You will, she said quietly. What? You said I should be grateful you didn't leave me sooner. But you will. And when you do, you'll regret it. Daniel laughed, cold and humorless. You? You think you can hurt me? Olivia, you wouldn't last a day without my name. He brushed past her and went back inside. For a long moment, Olivia stood alone under the night sky, the wind playing with her hair, the babies kicking softly inside her. Her heart was breaking. But something else was being born too. Not revenge, not hate, something quieter, stronger, resolve. The next morning, she woke to a message from an unknown number. Your father's lawyer. Urgent matter. Please call. Her heart raced as she dialed back. Mrs. Moore, a calm male voice said, my name is Charles Bennett. I worked with your late father. He left something for you. Confidential. Something for me? She asked. My father's been gone 3 years. Yes, but certain instructions were time-locked. They became active once your pregnancy reached 7 months. Time-locked? She frowned. What does that mean? Your father was a very cautious man. He created a trust, a large one, for your children. But there's a clause. What kind of clause? The trust will activate only after you give birth, Charles said. Not before. Olivia's breath caught. How much money are we talking about? There was a pause on the line. Then Charles said quietly, $1 billion. The phone nearly slipped from her hand. What? 1 billion. Set aside for you and your children. Your father was aware of your husband's tendencies. He wanted to protect you. Olivia pressed a hand to her chest. My father knew. He did. And he suspected your husband might try to control your finances once the pregnancy began. He built this clause to prevent it. No one, not even your husband, can touch the trust until after birth. Olivia's mind spun. Daniel's voice from the night before echoed in her head. You should be grateful I didn't leave you sooner. Her father's words from years ago flashed back. The last time they spoke before he died. Marry for love, live, not for power, and if power comes, make sure it's yours. Now she understood what he meant. That evening, Olivia met Charles in person at a quiet cafe far from the Moore estate. She wore sunglasses and a scarf, careful not to draw attention. Charles was older, gray-haired, with kind eyes. He handed her a sealed folder. Inside are the details. I suggest you keep this hidden until the twins are born. Olivia nodded. Daniel can't know. No, Charles said firmly. If he divorces you before birth, he forfeits all claim automatically. The trust was written that way on purpose. Olivia blinked. He forfeits everything? Yes. And based on what I've seen in the news, Mrs. Moore, your husband looks impatient. She gave a small, humorless laugh. He always is. Charles leaned forward. Endure it, Olivia. Just until the birth. Don't react. Don't argue. Pretend everything is normal. She nodded slowly. I can do that. But inside something shifted. The fear that had ruled her for years, the fear of Daniel's power, his family, their wealth, began to fade. She wasn't powerless. She was simply waiting for the right time. That night, as Daniel came home smelling like Samantha's perfume, Olivia sat in the living room pretending to read. He didn't even glance her way. He walked past, muttering, I'm filing those papers next week. She looked up. What papers? Divorce, he said casually. My lawyer will handle it. I'll make sure you get something for the babies. Something, she repeated quietly. Daniel smirked. Don't worry. I'm not cruel. You'll have the guest house, maybe a nanny. He walked upstairs without another word. Olivia stayed still, heart pounding, her hand resting over her belly. The babies kicked again, as if reminding her they were waiting too. Just a few more weeks, she whispered to them. Then everything changes. The next morning began the same way most mornings did, with silence. Daniel left early for meetings. Though Olivia knew what that really meant, his schedule matched Samantha's Instagram stories too perfectly. Breakfast for one, lunch at the golf club, dinner she cooked but never shared. Every day blurred into the next, a quiet loop of humiliation and endurance. Margaret ruled the house like a queen mother. Her voice echoed through the marble halls, giving orders to maids and gardeners, as if she owned them all. And in many ways she did. Olivia was simply another servant who happened to wear a wedding ring. Where is Daniel's blue suit? Margaret barked one morning. The one from Armani. He needs it for the press shoot. Olivia folded baby clothes at the table. He wore it yesterday. It's at the cleaners, Margaret's eyes narrowed. You should have had it ready. I didn't know about the shoot, Olivia said carefully. Well, you should have known. That's the problem with you, Olivia. You never think ahead. Margaret paused, then smiled with thin lips. No wonder Daniel looks elsewhere. The words stung, even though she'd heard worse. Olivia didn't flinch. I'm sure he tells you everything, she said quietly. Oh, he does, Margaret replied proudly. He tells me more than you'd want to know. At that moment, Olivia's phone buzzed on the counter. A message from an unknown number flashed. Meeting confirmed. Wednesday, 5 p.m. She quickly turned it face down. Margaret's eyes caught the movement. Who's that? She asked. Doctor's appointment, Olivia lied smoothly. Margaret's mouth twisted. Well, I hope it's for something that will make you more useful around here. Olivia smiled faintly. I'll ask. That night she lay awake in the massive bed, listening to Daniel snore beside her. The man she once loved, who once whispered promises of forever, now lay only inches away but felt miles apart. She watched the city lights through the window and whispered to herself, You chose this, Olivia. You'll finish it. 2 days later, Daniel came home late again, half drunk and smiling. Olivia was in the nursery folding baby blankets when he walked in without knocking. You've been spending a lot of money lately, he said. I bought the cribs, she answered, and baby clothes. You don't need to buy everything. We'll have plenty of gifts. You mean from Samantha? She asked before she could stop herself. Daniel's expression hardened. Don't start. I'm not starting. I'm asking. He stepped closer, his voice low. You know what your problem is, Olivia. You think being pregnant gives you power. It doesn't. It just makes you slower, softer, weaker. She met his gaze. Or it makes me patient. He laughed bitterly. Patient? That's one word for it. Others might call it pathetic. He turned to leave, then stopped at the door. We're going to the gala on Friday. Samantha's organizing it for charity. Be nice to her. Her throat tightened. Why would I? Because she'll be the face of my new foundation, he interrupted. She knows how to talk to people. You don't. He left before she could respond. That night she cried quietly in the dark, not from sadness anymore, but from the sheer weight of holding everything in. Wednesday came, and Olivia met Charles Bennett again in his office downtown. He spread the documents on the table carefully. Everything is in place, he said. When the twins are born, the trust activates automatically. It's untouchable. Daniel can't access it even if you die before the birth. Your father thought of everything. Olivia swallowed hard. And if Daniel divorces me before that, then he forfeits his share entirely, Charles said. Your father added that clause after Daniel's last business scandal. Her eyes widened. My father knew about that? He did. He told me once, my daughter's marrying a shark. Let's make sure he can't bite. For the first time in months, Olivia laughed. A small, broken laugh, but real. Charles smiled kindly. You remind me of him. The same quiet steel. She looked down at her hands. I don't feel strong. You don't have to yet, he said gently. You just have to last. From that day on, something inside Olivia changed. She still played her part, the obedient wife, the quiet hostess. But her silence had a purpose now. Every insult became a reminder. Every humiliation became fuel. Every glance from Samantha or Margaret only sharpened her resolve. At the charity gala that Friday, she dressed in a soft blue gown that hugged her pregnant belly. She felt fragile but beautiful, a walking contradiction. As they entered the ballroom, cameras flashed. Daniel's arm was stiff around her. Samantha was already there, radiant and glowing, greeting donors with the ease of someone who knew she was winning. When she saw Olivia, her smile was polite but hollow. You look wonderful, Samantha said sweetly. Olivia returned it with calm eyes. You too. I see you've made yourself at home. Samantha's smile faltered slightly. I'm helping Daniel. You know how much he values loyalty, Olivia tilted her head. Loyalty, she repeated. That's one word for it. Daniel appeared beside them, glass of champagne in hand. Ladies, behave, he said with a smirk. No need for drama. Samantha slipped her hand through his arm. Don't worry, Daniel. Olivia knows her place. Olivia's heart pounded, but her voice stayed calm. Oh, I know it very well. Do you? Daniel's jaw tightened. Enough, Olivia. She smiled faintly and turned away, joining a group of guests before he could say more. She could feel his eyes on her, confused, maybe a little nervous. For the first time, he didn't control the room. Later that night, after the gala, Olivia sat alone in the car while Daniel spoke on the phone outside. His voice carried through the open window. She's unbearable lately, he said. I'm filing the papers soon. Once she's out, we can finally do what we planned. There was a pause, then laughter. Samantha's laughter. On the other end, yeah, Daniel continued. Once she's gone, we'll take everything. The house, the accounts, she won't see a dime. My lawyer says we can freeze the joint accounts before the divorce hits court. Olivia's hand went to her belly instinctively. Her heartbeat pounded in her ears. Every word sliced deeper, but every slice burned into memory. When Daniel finished his call, he opened the car door, acting like nothing had happened. You ready? He asked. Yes, she said calmly. Let's go home. He smiled, unaware that something irreversible had just shifted. Back at the mansion, Daniel went straight upstairs. Olivia stayed in the living room, staring at the dark fireplace, her hands resting protectively over her stomach. The house was silent, too big, too empty, too full of ghosts. Her father's photo sat on the bookshelf nearby. She looked at it and whispered, You were right, Dad. You always were. Then she heard footsteps again. Daniel was talking on the phone, louder this time. He walked into the hall, pacing near the study. Yeah, he was saying. Once she's out of the house, we'll take everything. His tone was low, confident. The words hit harder the second time. Olivia didn't move. She just listened. Every sound of his voice hardened her spine a little more. Finally, he went upstairs, laughing softly into the phone. The sound faded down the hall. Olivia stood there in the quiet, her reflection staring back at her in the dark window. Tired eyes, heavy belly, shaking hands. But her face didn't look weak anymore. It looked ready. She placed her hand gently over her stomach and whispered to her unborn children, her voice steady and clear. No, Daniel. I'll take everything. If you haven't subscribed yet, we'd love for you to join our community by hitting the subscribe button. Through our stories, we build hope and give a future to children and women who have been abused all over the world. Motivate us by subscribing and turning on your notification bell so you never miss a story that matters. Also, let us know in the comments, where are you watching from and how did this story speak to you? The morning of the baby shower began with perfect weather. Clear skies, sunshine spilling through the tall glass windows of the Moore estate, and a soft breeze that carried the smell of roses from the garden. Everything looked perfect. Everything felt wrong. Pink and blue balloons lined the walkway, ribbons tied around golden chairs, and a banner that read, "Welcome the Moore Twins," hung proudly across the backyard stage. Photographers from local magazines set up by the pool, waiting for the happy couple to make their grand appearance. Olivia stood upstairs, staring out at it all through the bedroom window. Her makeup was flawless, her white maternity dress glowing under the light, but her heart was steady, not with fear this time, but focus. Today was the day. Behind her, Margaret's voice broke the silence. "Try not to look so nervous, dear." People can smell desperation. Olivia didn't turn around. "I'm not nervous." Margaret's reflection appeared in the mirror behind her. Pearls around her neck, her hair pinned tight like a crown. "Good. Then you can focus on being gracious. There will be reporters, and Samantha will be here to help coordinate." Olivia turned. "Samantha? Here?" Margaret smiled thinly. "Of course. She's been part of Daniel's life for years now. We're a modern family, remember?" The way she said it, that smug calm, that subtle cruelty, made Olivia's fingers tighten around the edge of the vanity. Margaret looked her over, eyes scanning her from head to toe. "You've gained more than you should," she said casually. "Twins or not, appearances matter." Olivia met her gaze in the mirror. "Don't worry," she said quietly. "After today, appearances won't matter at all." Margaret frowned slightly as if she didn't understand the words, then brushed it off. "Just don't embarrass us." As she left, Olivia touched her belly gently. Her heart beat in rhythm with her baby's. Her father's words echoed in her mind. "Endure until the moment comes. Then don't hold back." Downstairs, the guests began to arrive. Family, friends, business partners, women in pastel dresses, holding expensive gifts and fake smiles. The air smelled like champagne and money. Daniel was the center of it all, charming as ever, shaking hands, laughing too loud, the perfect host. Olivia watched from the staircase, one hand resting on the railing, the other on her stomach. He looked up when he saw her and smiled, the kind of smile that didn't reach his eyes. "There's my lovely wife," he said, taking her hand as cameras flashed. "Doesn't she look stunning?" Applause, flattery, pity. Olivia smiled for the cameras. The perfect wife, the perfect lie. When the reporters moved on, Daniel leaned in close and whispered, "Keep that smile on, sweetheart." "You're good at pretending," she whispered back. "So are you." He grinned slightly, as if amused by her courage. "Let's not ruin the show." As the party continued, the heat rose and laughter filled the garden. Samantha appeared an hour later, wearing a pale pink dress that matched the theme, her hair in soft curls, her perfume floating before she even arrived. "Darling," she exclaimed, rushing up to Olivia with open arms. "You look radiant." Olivia let the hug happen. "Thanks, Sam." "You too," Samantha laughed lightly. "Well, we had to make this day special for you." Daniel's been so excited. He wanted everything perfect. "Perfect," Olivia repeated softly. "Yes, that sounds like him." Margaret appeared beside them, smiling proudly. "You girls are like sisters. I always say it's good Daniel has someone as refined as Samantha around. She keeps things balanced." Olivia smiled back. "I'm sure she does." Samantha's eyes darted briefly to Daniel, who was laughing across the yard with a group of investors. Her expression softened for just a second. Guilt, maybe. Then it was gone. 2 hours into the party, the band stopped playing for the scheduled thank you speeches. Olivia sat near the front, hands folded over her belly, surrounded by guests waiting to hear sweet words of gratitude and baby names. Daniel stood up, microphone in hand, flashing that practiced public smile. "First of all," he began, "thank you everyone for being here to celebrate this incredible day. My family means the world to me, and I want to thank my mother, Margaret, for organizing all this." Applause. Margaret beamed, And of course, Daniel continued, my wife, Olivia. She's been through a lot these last few months. Olivia smiled faintly. She felt her heart start to race, not from fear, but instinct. She could sense something coming. The air felt tight. Daniel turned to her. You've done your best, Liv. I appreciate that. Really? A strange hush spread across the guests. His tone wasn't loving. It was dismissive, almost rehearsed. Actually, he continued, there's something I need to share today. Something important. He reached into his jacket pocket. Olivia's chest tightened. This isn't easy, he said with a small laugh, though his eyes gleamed. But honesty matters in any relationship. He turned, faced her, and held out an envelope. Olivia, he said softly, I think it's time we both face the truth. The crowd grew still. The band members looked at each other nervously. Daniel smiled wider. I'm filing for divorce. The world stopped. Gasps, whispers. Someone's champagne glass shattered against the floor. Daniel placed the envelope in her hand like it was a gift. Don't make a scene, he said quietly. You'll be fine without me. Olivia stared at the envelope, then up at his smug face. She could feel the cameras flashing again, though now it wasn't celebration. It was blood in the water. Margaret's mouth fell open. Even Samantha froze. For a moment, Olivia thought she might break. Her throat burned. Her hands trembled. The babies kicked inside her like they could feel her heart cracking. But then, clarity. Calm. The kind of peace that comes right before a storm. She slowly placed the envelope on the table beside her and stood up. Every eye followed her. Daniel's smirk twitched. Since we're making announcements, she said softly, taking the mic from his hand. The crowd fell silent. First of all, she said, her voice steady, thank you everyone for coming. It means a lot to me that you're all here to celebrate our children. My children. With me. Daniel frowned. Olivia, sit down. She ignored him. I wasn't planning to say anything today, but since we're sharing surprises. She smiled faintly, turning toward the guests. I do have some news. Margaret shifted nervously in her seat. Samantha's face was pale. Olivia looked around the crowd, meeting their curious, waiting eyes. The reporters, the neighbors, the friends who had whispered behind her back. She could feel the weight of the moment pressing against her chest. Then she spoke. Olivia took a slow breath. Her hand didn't shake anymore. Her heart didn't race. For the first time in months, she felt completely steady. I do have some news, she said, her voice calm but carrying through the air like a soft blade. The crowd leaned in. Even the photographer lowered his camera. Daniel's smirk faded slightly, the confidence slipping just enough for her to notice. Olivia glanced down at her belly, then looked back up at the guests. Some of you might not know, but my father, before he passed away, set up a trust fund for his grandchildren, for these two little lives we're waiting on. The murmurs started. People smiled politely, thinking she was about to share something sentimental. Daniel crossed his arms. Olivia, that's not the time. She raised a hand to silence him. It's okay, dear. You've had your turn. A ripple of awkward laughter moved through the guests. She smiled sweetly. My father was a wise man. He believed love should protect, not control. He also believed that money should go to those who deserve it, not to those who think they own people. Daniel's eyes narrowed. What are you talking about? I'm talking about this, Olivia said, her voice rising just slightly. My father's trust fund was finalized last month. It's worth $1 billion. The crowd gasped. An audible, collective inhale. Samantha blinked like she hadn't heard right. $1 billion? Olivia nodded. Yes, $1 billion to be exact. And it activates the moment I give birth. She turned to Daniel. And according to the terms, it's in my name. And my children's. No one else's. The silence was heavy now. Thick, electric. You could feel the shift in power happening right there, in the middle of the rose garden. Daniel's expression froze, the practiced charm gone from his face. What? He said sharply. That's not possible. Oh, it is, Olivia said, her smile widening. And since you decided to end our marriage before the birth, you're legally excluded from the trust. Every clause, every loophole. My father thought of them all. Her voice softened, but the words cut like glass. So congratulations, Daniel. Your timing is impeccable. The entire backyard exploded. People whispered, gasped, turned to one another. Phones came out, recording. Someone from a local blog shouted, "Wait, is this real?" Cameras flashed. Margaret's face went ghost white. Samantha covered her mouth. Daniel just stood there, his hand still hanging by his side, the color draining from his cheeks. Olivia handed the mic to a stunned event host and stepped off the stage, calm, graceful, like a queen walking through wreckage. Margaret rushed up to her. You can't just announce things like that. You'll ruin Daniel's reputation." Olivia turned to her slowly. "He ruined mine first." Margaret blinked, speechless. "You ungrateful." "Enough, Margaret," Olivia said, her tone firm but quiet. "You don't have to pretend anymore. We both know you raised him to think people are things he can own." "Well," she placed a hand on her belly. "You can't own what you can't reach." Margaret's knees wobbled. The old woman's hand trembled as she reached for a chair. "This is nonsense," she muttered. "You can't have that kind of money." "Oh, but I do," Olivia said softly. "And soon your son will have nothing." Daniel finally found his voice. "You planned this," he said, his tone sharp, his face tight with fury. "You knew." "You stood there smiling, pretending to be weak." "I didn't pretend," Olivia interrupted. "I just stopped fighting battles that weren't worth it." "You taught me that." He stepped closer, his voice dropping low. "Do you realize what you've done? You've humiliated me in front of everyone." She looked at him calmly. "No, Daniel. You did that to yourself." He started, but Samantha suddenly cut in. "Daniel, we need to go," she whispered, grabbing his arm. "The reporters are—" He yanked his arm free. "Not now, Sam." Olivia looked between them, her voice cool. "Oh, don't fight over me." "You make such a lovely couple." Samantha's eyes filled with tears. "Olivia, I didn't mean—" Olivia smiled faintly. "You did. You just didn't think it would ever come back to you." As the chaos unfolded, guests began to scatter. Some were already uploading videos. Others whispered and stared, pretending to check their phones. The glittering, polished Moore family image was burning right before their eyes, and no one was stopping it. Daniel stormed toward the house. "We're leaving," he barked at his mother. Margaret followed, fanning herself, muttering, "This can't be happening." Samantha trailed behind, face pale and tight. Olivia remained outside, watching them go. The sunlight hit her face, and for the first time in a long time, she didn't hide from it. Her best friend Anna, one of the few people Daniel hadn't pushed away, approached slowly. "Liv, I don't even know what to say." "That was— wow." Olivia gave a small smile. "Messy?" "Powerful," Anna said, eyes wide. Daniel's face looked like he swallowed a cactus. Olivia laughed quietly. "Good." Anna hesitated. "You really had that money all along?" "I didn't have it yet," Olivia said, "but my father's trust is airtight." Daniel thought he was cutting me off. He was actually cutting himself out. Anna whistled softly. "That's, poetic." Olivia looked toward the mansion, where the sounds of shouting were now faintly echoing through the open doors. "No, Anna. That's justice inside." Daniel was losing it. Margaret tried to calm him. "We can fix this, Daniel. We'll talk to the lawyer." "She played me," Daniel snapped, pacing. "She let me walk right into this. She made me look like a fool." "You made yourself look like a fool," Samantha muttered under her breath. Daniel turned on her. "What did you say?" Samantha straightened her shoulders. "You're blaming everyone but yourself. You did this, Daniel. You pushed her. You humiliated her. What did you think she'd do? Cry forever?" For a moment, he looked at her like she was a stranger. "Get out," he said flatly. "What?" "Out!" he roared, throwing a glass across the room. It shattered against the wall. Samantha flinched and left without another word. Margaret's voice trembled. "Daniel, please, leave me alone," he snapped, gripping his hair. $1 billion. I could have had—" He stopped mid-sentence. His eyes widened as he realized the full extent of what he'd lost. She knew, he whispered. She knew about the clause. Margaret looked sick. What clause? He turned to her, face white with rage. The one that locks me out if I divorce her before the birth. Margaret gasped. Oh, Daniel? Oh, Daniel, what? He yelled. You told me to divorce her now. You said to do it before the twins came so she wouldn't have leverage. Margaret went silent. Her lips trembled. Daniel slammed his hand against the wall. You destroyed everything. Outside, the party was over. The guests were gone. Only a few workers were cleaning up the remains. Balloons deflated, petals scattered, half-eaten cake sitting in the sun. Olivia stood near the pool, watching the reflection of the pink and blue decorations rippling on the water. She could still hear Daniel's voice echo faintly inside the house, shouting, crashing, breaking. Anna touched her shoulder. You okay? Olivia nodded. Better than I've been in a long time. Anna smiled. I'm proud of you. Don't be, Olivia said softly. Not yet. He's not done, and neither am I. Later that evening, when the house finally went quiet, Daniel walked out onto the back patio. The sun was setting, and Olivia stood near the railing, her silhouette calm against the fading light. He stopped a few feet behind her. You think you've beaten me? He said, his voice low and shaking with anger. Olivia turned slowly. Her face was calm, almost kind. No, Daniel, he frowned. Then what is this? She stepped closer, close enough for him to see the fire behind her eyes. This, she said quietly, is just the beginning. He blinked, thrown off. What? She smiled, the kind that chilled him. No, she said softly. I've just started. The video of the baby shower had gone viral before sunrise. Every gossip page, business blog, and social feed was flooded with it. Billionaire husband humiliates pregnant wife. Her response destroys him. By morning, Daniel Moore wasn't the polished businessman anymore. He was a meme. Clips of Olivia's calm announcement. $1 billion, all in my name and my children's, played on repeat across the internet. Underneath, comments poured in, Queen behavior. She planned that like a movie. I hope the twins inherit her fire. Olivia stayed offline. She didn't need to see the world cheering for her. She already knew she'd struck the first real blow, but she also knew Daniel wouldn't go down without a fight. 3 days after the baby shower, she woke up to flashing cameras outside the estate gates. Reporters shouted questions. Headlines screamed lies. Olivia Moore cheated with best friend's brother? Sources claim billionaire wife hid assets from husband. She stood at the window, watching the chaos below through the curtain. Her phone buzzed nonstop. Texts, calls, notifications. Then a message from Daniel's lawyer appeared on the screen. Daniel is filing for emergency custody of the unborn twins. Her knees weakened. Custody, she whispered. Charles Bennett, her father's lawyer and now her confidant, arrived an hour later. His calm voice anchored her. They're claiming you're mentally unstable, he explained. They say you're planning to flee the country with the trust money. Olivia sat still for a long moment, staring down at her trembling hands. Then she lifted her head, her voice quiet but sharp. He's trying to break me. Charles nodded. He's desperate. Moore Enterprises stock dropped 15% overnight after the video went viral. She looked out the window. Let him fall. He studied her face. You could sue him for defamation. She shook her head. No, let him talk. The more noise he makes, the more people will see who he really is. And she was right. Over the next week, Daniel appeared on talk shows, trying to spin the story. He told reporters Olivia was unwell, that she'd been influenced by greedy lawyers. He called her announcement a cruel ambush. But the public wasn't buying it. His smirk, once magnetic, now looked smug. His tone, once charming, now sounded cruel. Every word he spoke made him look guiltier. Olivia, silent, poised, heavily pregnant, became the symbol of quiet strength. When she went out for a short walk in the park one morning, a stranger approached her with a warm smile. You're her, aren't you? The woman asked. The wife. The strong one. Olivia blinked, startled. I guess I am. The woman squeezed her hand gently. Don't let them turn you into the villain. You already won. Olivia smiled faintly. Not yet, she said, but soon. Across town, Daniel was losing control of everything. At the office, his boardroom had turned into a war zone. Investors were pulling out. Journalists were asking hard questions. His once loyal assistant avoided eye contact. The air felt poisoned with fear. Then came Samantha. She burst into his office one night, her makeup streaked with tears, voice shaking. "You plan to leave me too?" she shouted. Daniel barely looked up from his laptop. "Don't start this, Sam." "Don't start this?" She slammed a folder on his desk. "I lied for you. I defended you. And I find out from your mother that you're planning to marry that senator's daughter once this divorce is over." Daniel sighed as if bored. "You were useful, Samantha." "Don't confuse that with love." Her eyes filled with disbelief. "Useful?" She laughed bitterly. "Do you think I don't know about the forged contracts? The fake client signatures? The missing money?" He looked up sharply. "You don't know what you're talking about." "Oh, I do," she said, her voice trembling with fury. "You left your laptop open last week. I took photos." Daniel froze. "You wouldn't—" "I already did," she cut in, "and I sent them to a journalist. And to your board." She turned and walked out. He didn't even try to stop her. Within 48 hours, the leaked documents were everywhere. Fake invoices, altered numbers, offshore accounts. The story hit every major outlet. More enterprises under investigation for fraud. The stock price crashed. The board panicked. Investors called emergency meetings. Daniel's phone rang nonstop. Lawyers, accountants, his mother. "Tell me this isn't true," as Margaret cried over the line. "You're destroying our family name." "Enough about the damn name, Dunner," he snapped. "Do you know what that woman did?" "She ruined me." But deep down, he knew it wasn't Olivia who'd ruined him. She'd simply stopped shielding him from the truth. While Daniel shouted into phones and cursed the world, Olivia sat quietly in Charles Bennett's office downtown, signing papers. Stacks of documents filled the table. Ownership transfers, stock purchases, confidentiality agreements. "The company's value is dropping fast," Charles said, adjusting his glasses. "If we move quietly through holding companies, we can acquire significant control before he realizes what's happening." Olivia nodded slowly. "And he won't know." "Not until it's done," Charles assured her. "Your father's trust will act as the primary investor." "All perfectly legal." She looked at the papers before her. "He spent years making me feel small, making me think I couldn't survive without him." She exhaled softly. "Now I want him to understand what that feels like." Charles hesitated. "Olivia, this isn't revenge, is it?" She smiled faintly. "No, it's balance." Weeks passed. Daniel's empire continued to crumble. Every time he tried to repair his image, another headline landed like a punch. "Daniel Moore accused of fraud." "Former employees sue for unpaid wages." "Billionaire's mistress leaks shocking evidence." Meanwhile, Olivia appeared once on a morning talk show. Her voice was calm, her dress simple, her tone gracious. "I don't hate Daniel," she said. "I just wish him peace. And I hope he learns that you can't build happiness on someone else's pain." The host smiled. "You've handled this with such grace." Olivia just replied softly, "I learned that sometimes silence says more than shouting." That interview went viral too. Her calmness made Daniel's anger look pathetic. Public opinion turned entirely against him. Investors abandoned him. Bankers refused his calls. His own board began meeting without him. And through it all, Olivia kept signing. Every signature brought her closer to owning the company that had once been used to control her. Daniel's nights became a blur of alcohol, phone calls, and panic. He stopped sleeping. He stopped eating. He stopped being feared. One night he sat alone in his office, staring at the wall of framed awards. They looked fake now, props from a life built on lies. He poured another drink and whispered her name under his breath, almost like a curse. "Olivia." The next morning, when he arrived at work, half the office was empty. His CFO resigned. His assistant cleared her desk. Even the janitor avoided him. "Sir," one of the remaining board members said cautiously, "there's a new investor buying up company shares. Fast." They've already reached 40%. Daniel's jaw tightened. Who? We don't know. The purchases are coming through shell corporations, but they're all connected to something called Bennett Holdings. He froze. Bennett? The man nodded. Yes, sir. Do you know them? Daniel didn't answer. He walked into his office, slammed the door, and ripped open his files. He called his accountant, then his lawyer, then another broker. All gave him the same name, Bennett Holdings. His pulse quickened. He knew that name. Charles Bennett, Olivia's lawyer, her father's old friend. No, Daniel muttered, pacing. No, no, no. He grabbed the report and scanned the list of transactions. Everyone pointed back to her. She's buying it, he whispered, eyes wide. She's buying my company. His reflection in the window looked like a stranger. Wild-eyed, hollow, desperate. He slammed his fist against the glass. You think you can take everything from me? He shouted at his own reflection. But deep down, he knew she already had. That evening, Olivia sat in Charles's office again. The lights were dim, the air calm. The city outside glowed under the dusk. Her belly was heavy now. The twins would arrive soon. But her hand was steady as she flipped through the final set of documents. These are the last one, Charles said, sliding a folder toward her. Once you sign, you'll hold 51% of more enterprises. You'll have complete control. Olivia stared at the papers. Her father's name was printed in the fine legal clauses. The man who had seen all of this coming. Does he know yet? She asked quietly. Charles smiled. He found out about the shell company this morning. Olivia exhaled softly. Then I guess he finally knows what it feels like. Charles's expression softened. He'll fight this, Olivia. He'll try every trick. He can try, she said calmly, but he can't win a game that was built on lies. He's run out of pieces to move. Charles looked at her thoughtfully. May I ask something? Off the record? She nodded. What do you want out of this? He asked. Power? Revenge? Justice? Olivia's gaze lingered on the papers in front of her. Her reflection shimmered faintly in the polished table. Not the broken woman she once was, but someone sharper, stronger. I want peace, she said quietly, and peace isn't free. This is the price. She picked up the pen, steady and sure, and began signing. Each stroke of ink felt like closing a door she'd been trapped behind for years. When she finished, Charles gathered the papers and slid them neatly into his briefcase. That's it, he said softly. It's done. By morning, you'll be the majority owner. He can't touch the company without your permission. Olivia leaned back in her chair, exhausted but calm. Outside, the city lights flickered. 1,000 tiny reminders that life went on. She placed a hand over her belly. The twins kicked softly as if approving. They'll never live like I did, she whispered. Never. Charles smiled. Your father would be proud, Olivia. She nodded slowly, her eyes calm, her voice almost a whisper. By the time he knows, she said, it'll all belong to me. The hospital lights were soft and white, too clean, too calm for a day that felt this big. Outside, news vans lined the street. The story of Olivia Moore had become national, the pregnant billionaire's wife who stood up to her cheating husband and turned his downfall into her rise. Every outlet wanted a glimpse of her. Inside her private room, Olivia lay in bed, pale but glowing, her hair loose around her shoulders. 2 bassinets sat beside her, one wrapped in a blue blanket, one in pink. Her twins, a boy and a girl, perfect, tiny, real. She couldn't stop staring at them. Every breath, every twitch of their fingers, every sound they made was proof that she'd made it. Through humiliation, through betrayal, through heartbreak, she'd survived. The door opened quietly and Charles Bennett stepped in with a warm smile. You did it, he said softly. How do you feel? Like I can finally breathe, she whispered. He smiled. The world can't stop talking about you. They're calling you the billion-dollar mother. Olivia laughed lightly. They always have to make it about money. She looked down at her children again. They're all that matters now. Charles placed a folder on the table beside her bed. Rest today. We'll finalize everything tomorrow morning. After that, you'll never have to hear the name Daniel Moore again. Unless you want to. Olivia nodded slowly. Thank you, Charles. For everything, he gave her a small bow of the head. Your father would have been proud. As he left, she reached out and touched both tiny hands in the bassinets. Your grandfather made sure I could protect you, she whispered, and I promise, I will. Hours later, as dusk fell over the city, the elevator doors opened at the far end of the corridor. Daniel Moore stepped out. His suit was wrinkled. His eyes were bloodshot. His once carefully styled hair was messy, his jaw covered with stubble. He looked nothing like the man who once graced magazine covers. A nurse spotted him immediately and stiffened. Mr. Moore, you can't be here. Mrs. Moore, she's my wife, he snapped. The nurse hesitated. Security said, I just want to see my children, he said, his voice breaking for the first time in weeks. The nurse looked unsure, then quietly stepped aside. 5 minutes, she said. Daniel walked down the hallway slowly, his footsteps echoing against the sterile floor. Each step felt heavier. When he reached Olivia's door, he stopped. For a long moment, he just stared at the nameplate beside it. Olivia Bennett Moore. She'd added her father's name back. He knocked once, quietly. Come in, came her soft voice. Daniel opened the door. Olivia looked up, startled for a moment, then calm again. The twins slept peacefully beside her. He stood in the doorway, lost for words. You shouldn't be here, she said finally. I needed to see you, he murmured, and them. Her eyes followed his gaze to the bassinets. You've seen enough, Daniel. The cameras saw everything. I didn't come for that, he said quickly. I came because... He swallowed hard. I've lost everything, Olivia. She looked at him quietly. You chose that. He took a hesitant step closer. I didn't mean for it to end like this. I thought I was in control. I thought... He broke off, voice shaking. I don't even know what I thought anymore. Olivia tilted her head slightly. Control. That's all you ever wanted, Daniel. Control of your image, your money, your mother, me. He sank into the chair beside her bed, covering his face with his hands. You won, he said finally. Okay? You won. What do you want from me? She watched him for a long moment before answering. Her voice was quiet even, but it filled the room. Nothing, she said. I already own what you wanted most. He looked up, confused. What are you talking about? But before she could answer, there was a knock at the door. Charles Bennett stepped inside again, carrying a black briefcase. I'm sorry to interrupt, he said, glancing at Daniel, but since you're both here, this might be the right moment. Daniel frowned. Who the hell are you? Charles Bennett, he said smoothly, Olivia's lawyer, and the man who's about to end whatever hope you still think you have. Daniel's face hardened. You have no right to be here. Charles ignored him. He opened the briefcase and pulled out several thick documents, placing them on the table near Olivia's bed. These are the final transfer papers. Moore Enterprises is now officially under new ownership. Daniel froze. What? Olivia's expression was calm, almost serene. I told you, Daniel. I already own what you wanted, most, his voice rose. You can't. That company is mine. It was yours, Charles said dryly. But over the last several weeks, through legal channels and silent acquisition, the majority shares were purchased under Bennett Holdings. As of this morning, Mrs. Moore is the controlling owner. Daniel turned to her, disbelief twisting his face. You bought my company? Olivia smiled faintly. No, I transformed it. He blinked, stunned. What? She nodded toward the paperwork. It's no longer called Moore Enterprises. It's been renamed the Moore Foundation for Women and Children. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. Your company, she continued softly, will now build homes for single mothers and fund scholarships for girls who can't afford education. That's what legacy looks like. For a long moment, Daniel just stared at her. Eyes wide, chest rising and falling fast. Then slowly, his shoulders slumped. You turned my empire into a charity? She met his eyes. No, I turned it into something useful. Daniel stood frozen. His face was pale, his hands trembling. For the first time in his life, he looked small. He tried to speak, but the words stumbled out broken. You can't do this to me. You don't know what you're doing, Olivia. You've destroyed everything I built. Olivia's voice was steady. You destroyed it when you built it on cruelty. I worked for that company, he shouted, his voice cracking. I gave it my life. You gave it your lies, she said softly. Your company was rotting from the inside. You just didn't notice because everyone was too scared to tell you the truth. He turned to Charles, desperate. This can't be legal. There's no way she... It's perfectly legal, Charles interrupted, his tone calm. The documents were verified by federal regulators this morning. You signed enough fraudulent statements to make this transition easier than we expected. Daniel stumbled backward a step, gripping the wall. You planned this, he muttered. You've been planning this for months. Olivia met his gaze. No, Daniel. You planned your own downfall. I just made sure you couldn't drag me down with you. He looked at the bassinets, at the twins he'd barely glanced at since entering the room. His expression softened for a moment, as if he might say something human. I just wanted to see them, he whispered. My children. Olivia followed his gaze. You should have thought about them before you humiliated their mother in front of the world. He looked away. I didn't know you'd... He stopped himself. I thought you'd beg. That's what you do. Her voice turned quiet. You thought wrong. For a moment the room was silent, except for the rhythmic sound of the heart monitor beside her bed. Then Olivia reached for the papers Charles had brought and began signing one more document. Slowly, deliberately. Daniel's voice trembled. What now? You run the company? You think that makes you better than me? She looked at him, her expression calm. No, it makes me free. He frowned, confused. What do you mean? Olivia handed the last signed document to Charles. That's the official transfer. I'm resigning from all public roles. The company and the trust fund will both be managed under a board for my children's future. I won't take a cent. Daniel blinked. You're giving it away? She nodded. I didn't buy it to own it, Daniel. I bought it so you couldn't. For a moment, he just stared at her, his mouth slightly open. Then he laughed. A broken, hollow sound. You're insane, he said. You think this makes you noble? No, she said, her tone firm but gentle. It just makes me done. Daniel's laugh faded. His eyes darted around the room. The flowers, the monitors, the bassinets, as if trying to find something to hold on to, some trace of the life that used to be his. But there was nothing left. He reached into his pocket, pulled out his phone, and scrolled through the notifications. Angry messages, news alerts, endless comments mocking him. He threw it on the floor, the glass shattering. This isn't over, he whispered. It can't be over. Olivia watched him quietly. It's been over for a long time. You just never noticed. He stared at her again, his eyes red, his pride gone. What do I do now, Olivia? She looked at him, her expression softening, not with pity, but finality. You learn. You sit with what you've done. You live with it. That's your punishment. For the first time in years, he had no words. His shoulders sagged. His hands fell to his sides. He nodded weakly, then turned toward the door. At the threshold, he paused and looked back at the twins, his children. He opened his mouth, but no sound came out. He left the room silently. The sound of his footsteps faded down the hall. Charles exhaled quietly and turned to Olivia. Are you sure about resigning? You could build an empire from this foundation. Olivia shook her head. I don't want an empire. I want peace. He smiled faintly. Then you've earned it. An hour later, the hospital corridor was empty except for one man sitting alone on a bench. Daniel Moore. He stared blankly at the floor, the weight of everything pressing down on him. The lost company, the ruined name, the wife who no longer feared him. From inside Olivia's room came the faint sound of babies crying, the only reminder of the life he'd thrown away. He buried his face in his hands. For the first time in his life, Daniel Moore wept. The next morning, sunlight poured through the hospital windows. Olivia stood by the glass, holding both twins, one in each arm. She wore a simple blue dress and a soft smile that didn't need words. Outside, reporters swarmed. Security struggled to hold them back as flashes went off like fireworks. She stepped carefully toward the exit, the twins bundled in white blankets. The crowd erupted with questions. "Mrs. Moore, how does it feel to own the company that once destroyed you?" Olivia paused. The microphones reached forward like hands grabbing for her words. She looked up, her expression calm, her voice clear. "I didn't buy it to own it," she said softly. "I bought it so he couldn't." The crowd went silent. Cameras clicked. A few reporters exchanged stunned looks. Then she smiled faintly, adjusting the twins in her arms. "Now, if you'll excuse me, I have better things to build." She walked past them, her steps slow and sure, the morning sun lighting her path. Behind her, the hospital doors slid shut, sealing off the noise, the chaos, the past. Ahead of her, the city glowed, vast and alive, full of possibilities she could finally call her own. Later, in the back of the black car that drove her home, she gazed out the window, the twins sleeping beside her. The skyline shimmered in the distance, the same skyline she used to look at from Daniel's penthouse, feeling trapped. Now it felt different. Now it looked like freedom. Charles sat in the passenger seat, glancing back with a soft smile. "Where to, Mrs. Moore?" Olivia turned her head, watching the babies breathe peacefully. "Home," she said. "Not the mansion. The real one." Charles nodded, understanding without needing more words. "As you wish." The car moved through the city streets, the noise of the world fading behind them. Olivia closed her eyes, letting the warmth of the sun touch her face. For the first time in years, there was no fear, no anger, just peace. She whispered softly, almost to herself, "We made it." The car disappeared down the avenue, carrying her toward a new beginning, one not built on revenge or wealth, but on quiet strength and freedom. Because when a woman rises from the fire, she doesn't rebuild the cage. She buys it, locks it, and walks away.
The night was supposed to be dazzling. Instead, it was the moment the illusion shattered. At his lavish Bel Air estate, Charles Boyd, a man who built his empire on polished surfaces, raised a champagne flute to the glittering crowd. His designer suit shimmered under crystal chandeliers. But his eyes, cold as the marble beneath their feet, were fixed on his wife. "Tonight," his voice rang out, sharp as broken glass, "my beautiful Melina will do something no one has ever dared. She will give birth, right here in our pool, to prove that the Boyd legacy is powerful, natural, and unstoppable." Before she was Melina Moore, the trembling figure standing at the edge of that pool, she had been Melody Moore, the golden voice of America. A young woman from Nashville with fire in her soul and a smile that lit up every stage she stepped on. Her folk pop ballads, filled with love, pain, and hope, became the soundtrack of a generation. Her concerts sold out arenas within hours. Grammys lined her shelves. She was more than a singer. She was a symbol of authentic, heartfelt strength. But success came at a price. Endless tours, sleepless nights in sterile hotel rooms, and the crushing pressure of fame wore her down. Melina carried it all until one fateful night during a sold-out show at Madison Square Garden. Midway through her most famous ballad, the world tilted, the lights blurred into a blinding white, and her heart gave out. The collapse was splashed across every headline. Melody Moore faints on stage. Doctors gave her a stark warning. Rest, or you will lose more than your voice. You will lose your life. For the first time, Melina stepped away from the spotlight. The world wondered where she had gone. Some claimed she was in rehab. Others whispered she'd had a breakdown. The truth was far simpler and more tragic. She was exhausted, vulnerable, and profoundly alone. That was when Charles Boyd appeared. A Chicago real estate magnate with a charming smile and a portfolio as sharp as his tailored suits, he painted himself as a savior. He promised her peace, a family, and a life away from the suffocating glare of the cameras. "You've given the world enough of your soul, Melody," he'd whispered to her on their third date, his hand covering hers. "Let me give you a place to rest it." To a woman worn down to the bone, his words felt like a warm blanket. Against her manager's warnings, against the faint whisper of her own instincts, Melina said yes to his proposal. In the beginning, Charles kept his promises. He bought her the sprawling Bel Air mansion, a palace of glass and white marble overlooking the city. He whispered sweet words and spoke of the future they would build together. Melina, desperate to believe in a quiet love, thought she had finally found her refuge. She changed her professional name from Melody to Melina, a symbolic shedding of her old skin. She gave up her career, stopped singing, and devoted herself to being the perfect wife. But the fairy tale unraveled quickly. Charles's gentle mask began to slip. He became controlling, his charm curdling into a possessive jealousy of her past fame. He grew angry whenever fans recognized her in public, accusing her of clinging to the spotlight, even when she hid from it. "They don't see you, Melina," he would hiss in the car on the way home. "They see Melody Moore, a ghost. I'm the one who's real." Slowly, methodically, he chipped away at her confidence until the vibrant woman in the mirror became a pale, anxious stranger. Then came Isabella Vance, young, ambitious, and ruthless. Isabella entered their lives under the guise of a family friend, the daughter of one of Charles's business associates. Melina, ever gracious, tried to welcome her. But she soon saw the way Charles's eyes followed Isabella's silk-clad figure. The late-night phone calls he claimed were business, the sudden trips he took without her. The betrayal grew so obvious it was suffocating, but Melina stayed. For the baby. Pregnant and more vulnerable than ever, Melina told herself she had to endure. She sang lullabies to her unborn child in secret, clutching her belly with tears streaming down her face. She prayed the child would bring peace back into their home, that Charles would soften. Instead, his cruelty only deepened. Behind closed doors, he called her weak, mocking her for gaining weight. "You used to be a star," he'd sneer. "Now you're just a vessel." Isabella, always present with a sly smirk, would add her own poison. "You used to be someone, Melina. Now you're just a mother." Melina swallowed her pain, forcing a smile in public, hiding her bruised spirit behind designer gowns. The world that once adored her no longer knew her name. She was forgotten, erased, until tonight, this hideous, glittering party where her private nightmare was being thrust into the spotlight once more. Charles's hand gripped her shoulder like iron, his fingers digging into her skin. The music had stopped. All that remained was the sound of water lapping gently against the pool's edge and the collective gasp of the crowd. Staff moved with chilling efficiency. Towels, cameras, lights, all prepared. Every detail had been planned, except for the most important one, her safety. "Charles, please," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Not this, not tonight." Her plea was drowned in the wave of murmurs rising from the guests. He leaned in, his breath cold against her ear, his words meant only for her. "Smile, my love. You're about to make me the most talked-about man in Los Angeles." And as he propelled her forward, Melina realized the world would soon remember her name again, not for her music, but for her suffering. Charles Boyd was the kind of man who knew how to play a role. To outsiders, he was dazzling. He'd built a real estate empire from the ground up, transforming Chicago's skyline before setting his sights on the grand prize, Los Angeles. He spoke of ambition, of creating a legacy, of providing his wife with a life fit for royalty. People believed him. They always did. His handshake was firm, his smile disarming, and his confidence was a fortress. But behind the polished surface was a man consumed by a ravenous, gnawing greed that had its roots in the rust-pocked streets of Gary, Indiana. Charles wasn't born into wealth. He was born into the shadow of shuttered steel mills and broken dreams. He'd watched his father, a proud but beaten man, work himself into an early grave for a company that forgot his name the day he died. From that bitterness, Charles forged his life's mission. He would never be powerless. He would never be forgotten. He would climb so high that the world would have no choice but to look up at him in awe. Every relationship, every partnership, every smile he offered had a price. He didn't build his empire with brilliance alone. He built it by clawing his way up, using anyone necessary to secure his place at the top. He saw people not as human beings, but as assets or liabilities. And Melina Moore, the beloved Melody Moore, was the perfect asset. When he married her, Charles saw not a wife, but a brand. The world knew her as a star, a symbol of grace and talent. Her face opened doors he could never dream of touching. Marrying her wasn't an act of love, it was the ultimate acquisition. Her silence, her retirement, her retreat from fame. Those were his victories. He had tamed the golden voice of America and locked it away in a gilded cage. That was his power. In public, he paraded Melina like a prized possession, his hand always possessively on her back, a practiced smile on his lips. Behind closed doors, he was a different man. He was ruthless, his words honed into weapons. If she questioned him, he reminded her that without him, she was nothing but a washed-up singer with a weak heart. Each jab cut deeper until Melina's once bright spirit grew quieter, her vibrant eyes dimming. The pregnancy only emboldened him. To Charles, their child was another tool. He planned photo shoots, interviews, and lavish events, all centered around the marketing concept of the perfect Boyd family. He spoke about legacy, not love. He saw the baby as another way to polish his brand and elevate his status among the LA elite, the old money families who still looked down on the boy from Indiana. And then came Isabella Vance. Where Melina was gentle, Isabella was sharp. Where Melina sacrificed, Isabella demanded. Charles adored that ruthlessness. In Isabella, he saw a reflection of his own insatiable hunger. She didn't challenge his ego, she fueled it. She encouraged his cruelest schemes, whispering ideas of grandeur into his ear while laughing at Melina's quiet pain. Together they crafted the grotesque spectacle of the underwater birth. It was Isabella's idea, born during a late-night rendezvous in his downtown penthouse. "Think about it, Charles," she had purred, tracing the line of his jaw. "It's audacious, it's powerful. It shows you're a man who controls everything, even the very act of creation. No one in your circle would dare. They'll all envy you. They'll all bow to you." His ego swelled under her encouragement. The plan was simple and monstrous. Melina would deliver the baby in front of powerful investors and media figures, proving she was the perfect, obedient wife who would do anything for her visionary husband. The story would go viral worldwide. Charles Boyd, the man whose family embodies strength and defies convention. Any sign of Melina's weakness, her pain, or her fear would be buried under his carefully orchestrated image. He rehearsed his speech, planned the lighting, even chose the vintage of champagne for the celebratory toast. Every detail was precise because Charles believed perfection was the only way to keep the ghosts of Gary, Indiana, at bay. The only problem was Melina herself. She wasn't breaking fast enough. Somewhere deep inside her, the old Melody, the woman of fire and conviction, still breathed. He could feel it in her moments of quiet defiance, in the sad lullabies she hummed to her belly, and Charles couldn't allow that. He needed to extinguish that final spark. Tonight, as he stood by the pool, Charles wasn't thinking about his wife or his unborn child. He was thinking about cameras, headlines, and power. Melina was no longer a woman in his eyes. She was a stage prop. And as he gave the signal for her to step into the freezing water, Charles never realized that the show he had designed to immortalize his power would soon become his greatest humiliation. The mansion's ballroom shimmered with gold, silver, and glass. It was the kind of place where power gathered, where men in expensive suits talked about deals worth millions, and women compared diamonds the size of raindrops. Laughter echoed against the marble walls. For most of the guests, it was just another night of indulgence. For Melina Moore, it was a cage built to humiliate her. Everywhere she turned, eyes followed. Once, those eyes had belonged to fans who adored her. Tonight, they belonged to strangers, curious, cold, waiting to see what kind of spectacle her husband would create. Melina could feel their stares cutting into her skin, dissecting her like a rare specimen. Her hands trembled against her swollen belly. The baby kicked, as though warning her of the storm about to break. David thrived on the attention. Standing tall near the grand pool that glittered under the chandelier lights, he lifted his champagne glass. "Tonight," he declared, his voice booming with the confidence of a king, "my wife will bring life into this world in a way no one has ever seen. A symbol of purity, of strength, of our legacy." The crowd erupted in applause, though some gasps betrayed their shock. Melina's throat tightened. She wanted to scream, to beg someone, anyone, to stop this madness. But her voice was locked inside her chest. She could already hear Charles's cruel whisper in her mind. "Smile. Do as I say. Don't embarrass me." Isabella floated through the crowd like a glittering phantom, every step calculated. She wrapped her arm around Charles's and laughed, her voice carrying above the music. When Melina's face turned pale at the announcement, Isabella stepped in with practiced sweetness. She placed a hand over Melina's trembling ones. "Don't be afraid, darling," she said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "You'll be magnificent. Everyone will admire you." To the crowd, she was comforting. To Melina, the words were a blade twisted deeper. A hush fell over the guests as Melina was guided toward the pool's edge. The lights reflected off the water, casting ghostly ripples on her pale face. She gripped her belly tightly, whispering under her breath, "Please, not like this." No one answered. The silence was suffocating. Someone in the crowd muttered, "Is this safe?" Another whispered, "It's cruel." But no one dared raise their voice. No one dared defy Charles Boyd. Power and fear kept their lips sealed. And then, just as a staff member reached out to help her step down into the water, Melina saw it. Blood. It rushed from her nose, a sudden, shocking warmth dripping onto her trembling hands. The first drop silenced the ballroom. For a brief, frozen second, no one moved. The crimson stain spread across her hands, gleaming under the lights like a warning. Her body swayed. Instead of concern, Charles's face hardened. "Stand straight," he hissed through clenched teeth, his smile still plastered on for the cameras. "Don't ruin this moment." Melina's legs quivered. She tried to steady herself, but her vision blurred. The crowd whispered louder now, their curiosity mixing with unease. Isabella was the first to break the silence. She let out a light laugh. "Don't be so nervous, darling," she said loudly, her sweet voice dripping with venom. "Every woman bleeds a little when she's about to give birth. It's natural." Her words cut through the crowd, framing Melina's suffering as weakness, as if she were failing at her one purpose. Melina's body doubled over with a sudden, sharp contraction, a surge of agony that shot through her like fire. The guests gasped, stepping back as if her pain might be contagious. Charles seized her arm roughly, forcing her upright. "You will not embarrass me," he muttered under his breath, his grip like iron. Tears welled in Melina's eyes. She looked out into the sea of strangers, silently begging for help. But all she saw were curious stares, phones raised, cameras flashing. Not one hand reached for her. Her knees buckled again, and this time she collapsed against the marble tiles, the sound echoing through the grand hall. David crouched beside her, still smiling at the crowd. "She's fine," he assured them. "Just nerves." But Melina knew she wasn't fine. Her body shook violently as another contraction ripped through her. Isabella leaned down, her face inches from Melina's, her eyes sparkling with triumph. "Look at you," she whispered. "The world's forgotten star, crawling on the floor like a broken doll. Maybe it's better this way. Maybe you don't deserve to shine anymore." Those words pierced Melina deeper than the pain tearing through her body. Darkness crowded the edges of her vision, and as her head struck the floor, the crowd erupted into chaos. Charles's perfect smile finally stiffened. To the cameras, he looked like a devoted husband, but his whispered words were merciless. "Get up, Melina. You are not going to ruin this for me. You will go into that water. Now." He signaled to two of his security men. They stepped forward without expression, each grabbing one of her arms and dragging her toward the shimmering pool. Melina's bare feet scraped against the marble, leaving streaks of blood behind her. She thrashed weakly, begging, "No, please, I'll die!" But her cries were drowned in the buzz of whispers and the snapping of camera flashes. The men lifted her and lowered her into the freezing water. The icy shock of the water was a brutal awakening. Melina's body convulsed instantly, her breath ripped from her lungs in a silent scream. The water closed around her like a coffin, the cold piercing her skin, stabbing her muscles, and stealing the last of her strength. Her white gown, now stained with blood, floated around her like a ghostly shroud. The blood bloomed in the pristine water like crimson smoke. She struggled to keep her head above the surface, but another contraction, violent and unforgiving, tore through her. The scream that escaped her lips only sent more water rushing into her mouth. She coughed, choked, thrashed. Her arms flailed toward the crowd, a desperate, primal plea for help, but no one moved. No one reached for her. Some watched with horrified fascination, their phones held high to capture the unfolding tragedy. Others, with a morbid delight, saw it as the ultimate reality show. Charles stood tall at the pool's edge, his smile tight but unbroken, as though he were the unflappable host of a flawless show. Isabella leaned against him, whispering something that made him smirk. They were gods on their Olympus, watching a mortal suffer for their entertainment. Melina's vision blurred. The magnificent chandeliers fractured into a million splintered lights on the water's surface. She could feel her baby's faint heartbeat inside her own, a fragile, desperate drum against the encroaching darkness. With the last of her breath, she prayed, not for herself, but for the child she carried. Her body weakened, her limbs felt heavy as lead, her chest burned. Darkness closed in around her. She sank lower, her hands reaching up one last time through the water, bubbles escaping her lips in a final, silent cry. She thought it was the end. Then, suddenly, the surface of the water exploded. A tall figure, a shadow in a dark suit, dove into the pool without a moment's hesitation, cutting through the freezing water with powerful, urgent strokes. Strong arms wrapped around Melina's trembling body, pulling her up toward the air, toward life. Her head broke the surface, and she coughed violently, her lungs screaming as they took in a ragged breath. Gasps erupted from the crowd. Phones flashed like a lightning storm. Guests pushed forward, craning their necks to see who had dared to interrupt Charles Boyd's spectacle. And then they saw him, Julian Croft. He was no ordinary man in their world of luxury. Julian wasn't just wealthy, he was legendary. A reclusive tech billionaire from Silicon Valley, he had built his empire with steel determination and a vision that saw the future before anyone else. Rumors always followed him. The ruthless deal-maker, the untouchable tycoon who had dismantled corporate giants with a single phone call. He rarely appeared at social events, and his presence tonight was a coup for Charles, who had courted him for an investment. Yet in this moment, Julian wasn't a business titan. He was a savior. Lifting Melina into his arms, dripping wet and shivering, he carried her to the edge of the pool as if she weighed nothing. Water streamed from her gown, streaked with her blood. Her head lulled weakly against his chest, her lips pale, her breaths shallow and erratic. For the first time that evening, a true, profound silence fell over the room. The performance was over. Reality had crashed the party. Charles's face, a mask of curated charm just moments before, twisted into a mask of raw, unfiltered rage. "What do you think you're doing, Croft?" he hissed, his voice trembling with fury. "This is a private family matter." Julian's dark eyes, sharp enough to cut steel, locked onto him. His voice was calm, but held the thunderous weight of his authority. "I'm saving her life," he said, the words slicing through the air. "Something you clearly have no interest in." The words ignited murmurs among the guests. Some nodded in agreement, emboldened by Julian's defiance. Others shifted uncomfortably, unwilling to take sides but unable to ignore the truth. Isabella, rattled but quick to recover, stepped forward with her saccharine smile. "Julian, this is all a misunderstanding. Melina is just overwhelmed. Charles was only trying to—" Julian silenced her with a look so piercing that she faltered mid-sentence. He turned his attention back to Melina, his hand gently brushing the damp hair from her face. "You're safe now," he whispered, his voice meant only for her. Melina's eyelids fluttered. She caught a glimpse of his face, the strong jaw, the furrowed brow, the fierce protectiveness in his eyes. Something deep inside her stirred, a flicker of recognition. She remembered that face from years ago, in the front row at her concerts, a serious young man watching her with an intensity that stood out even in a sea of adoring fans. But before she could grasp the memory, another wave of pain ripped through her body. She cried out, clutching her belly as blood continued to seep from her. Julian's expression darkened. He lifted his head and barked to the stunned crowd, his voice a command that no one could ignore. "Call an ambulance, now!" No one moved at first, paralyzed by the shock of defying Charles Boyd. But Julian Croft's authority was absolute. Within seconds, someone dialed 911. Others rushed for towels and blankets. For the first time that night, Melina felt the weight of human compassion return to the room. But Charles wasn't finished. His pride was shredded, his grand plan ruined. Stepping closer, his voice lowered to a dangerous growl. "She's still my wife. You have no right to touch her." And as Charles reached for Melina, Julian rose to his full height, placing himself between them, the room bracing for the inevitable clash. Julian Croft rose from the poolside, water dripping from his $1,000 suit. Melina still cradled protectively in his arms. He stood tall, his presence commanding, his glare fixed on Charles Boyd. For a moment, the lavish ballroom felt like a battlefield. Guests froze, unsure whether they were about to witness a rescue or a war. Charles stepped forward, his smile gone, his mask of civility shattered. Fury twisted his handsome features into something monstrous. "She's my wife," he spat, pointing at Melina as if she were property. "You have no right to interfere." Julian didn't flinch. His voice was steady, resonant, carrying across the stunned crowd. "A husband protects his wife. He doesn't drag her bleeding into a freezing pool to show off like a circus act. You forfeited every right the moment you treated her like an object." The room gasped. No one had ever spoken to Charles Boyd like this. Not in public, not in front of his circle of power. Even Isabella's perfect smile faltered. She reached for Charles's arm, whispering, "Calm down. They're all watching." But Charles's pride was wounded beyond repair. His empire had been built on control, on intimidation, and now Julian Croft was dismantling it with words as sharp as blades. "You think you can embarrass me in my own house?" Charles snarled. "Do you know who I am?" Julian took one step closer, his frame towering, his aura radiating unshakable power. "Yes," he said evenly. "You're the man who almost killed his own wife and child for applause." The crowd erupted in murmurs. Some guests lowered their eyes, ashamed for having clapped earlier. Others pulled out their phones, the red lights of recording devices winking in the dimness. They sensed the scandal that would soon flood headlines. For the first time, Charles realized he was losing the audience. His reputation, his image, his carefully built illusion. It was crumbling. Melina stirred weakly in Julian's arms, her lips parting. "Please, stop," she whispered. But her plea only fueled Charles's rage. "Don't you dare side with him," he snapped at her. "You're mine, Melina. You will always be mine." Julian's eyes darkened, his voice dropping to a growl. "No, she doesn't belong to you. She belongs to herself, and she deserves better than this." That was the moment the shift happened. The guests were no longer passive observers. For years, many had whispered doubts about Charles's cruelty, but none had dared to speak out. Now, with Julian standing as living proof of courage, they saw the truth laid bare. Isabella's mask cracked too. She clutched Charles's arm tighter, her eyes darting nervously. If Charles fell tonight, her glittering dream of power collapsed with him. "Charles," she hissed under her breath, "control yourself." But he had lost control entirely. His face burned red, veins bulging in his neck. He lunged forward, grabbing for Melina, his hand clawing at her wrist. Julian pivoted swiftly, shifting Melina to one arm while blocking Charles's advance with the other. The force of their collision echoed across the marble. Glasses shattered on nearby tables as startled guests leaped back. For a second, the two men locked eyes, Charles's blazing with desperation, Julian's burning with unshakable resolve. And in that tense silence, before anyone could breathe, Charles drew back his fist, ready to strike, not realizing the cameras were capturing every second of his downfall. The ballroom froze as his fist hung in the air, trembling with rage. Michael shifted his weight, his jaw tightening. In one swift, fluid movement, he caught Charles's wrist just before the blow could land. The clash of strength reverberated through the silence. "She's mine!" Charles roared, spit flying from his lips. His voice cracked not with love, but with the desperation of ownership. "You can't take her from me!" Julian's eyes blazed. "You already lost her," he said, his voice ringing like a verdict. "The moment you chose your pride over her life." Isabella, realizing disaster was unfolding, tried to intervene. "Everyone, please," she said, her voice wavering. "This is just a misunderstanding. Charles is under a lot of stress." Her words were drowned out by the sound of Melina coughing violently. Blood trickled from her lips. The sight silenced the room more effectively than any speech. The horror on the guests' faces grew as her condition worsened before their eyes. Julian's protective instinct surged. He turned toward the exit. "She needs a hospital. Now!" Several guests finally broke free from their fear. Someone shouted that the ambulance was on its way. Others cleared a path. But Charles wasn't done. He lunged again, his eyes wild. "Don't you dare walk out with her! She stays with me!" Julian spun around, his glare like fire. Then he spoke, his voice low, dangerous, and final. "Touch her again, and I will end you." The crowd erupted. "Call security," someone yelled. "Get him away from her." The tide had turned completely. Where once Charles commanded respect, now he inspired only fear and disgust. As the wail of sirens grew louder outside, flashing red and blue lights reflecting against the tall windows, everyone knew this night would mark the beginning of Charles Boyd's ruin. Just as the paramedics burst through the doors, Charles broke free and lunged one last time, not at Julian, but directly at Melina. The ambulance tore through the streets of Los Angeles, its sirens wailing against the night. Inside, Melina lay strapped to a stretcher, her body shaking uncontrollably. The oxygen mask fogged with every desperate, ragged breath. Paramedics worked swiftly, their voices sharp and urgent. "She's losing too much blood. BP is dropping fast." Beside her, Julian Croft sat rigid, his large hand gripping hers with unyielding strength. His expensive suit was soaked, but he didn't care. His world had narrowed to the fragile woman before him. He leaned closer, his voice breaking through the chaos. "Stay with me, Melina. Please. You're stronger than this." Her eyelids fluttered. In her fading consciousness, she saw fragments of her life. The bright lights on stage, the roar of fans, the cruelty of betrayal. And now, the warmth of a man who held her not as a trophy, but as something precious. Her lips moved faintly under the mask. "The baby. Please. Save the baby." Julian's chest tightened, his throat aching with an emotion he hadn't felt in years. "We'll save you both," he vowed. "I promise." The ambulance jolted to a stop at Cedars-Sinai Medical Center. The doors flung open, and the stretcher was wheeled out with urgency. Inside the emergency room, doctors and nurses swarmed around Melina. "She's hemorrhaging. Prep for surgery now." The air filled with the sound of beeping monitors and frantic calls. Julian stood at the edge of the chaos, his fists clenched, feeling utterly helpless for the first time in his life. He was a man used to control, to bending the world to his will. But here, he could only watch as Melina's life hung by a thread. A surgeon turned to him briefly, his face grim. "Sir, we need to operate immediately. She's critical and the baby, it's too early to tell." The words struck Julian like a hammer. He stepped closer to Melina as they wheeled her away, bending down to whisper in her ear. "Fight, Melina. Fight for yourself. Fight for your child. Don't let him take anything else from you." Her hand twitched weakly in his. A single tear slipped down her cheek. Then the monitors shrieked a piercing alarm. Her body convulsed. Her pulse was crashing. "We're losing her," a doctor shouted. The emergency room doors slammed shut, leaving Julian staring at his own reflection in the narrow glass window. Inside, the operating room was a scene of controlled frenzy. "BP is crashing. Start transfusion, now!" The lead surgeon, Dr. Aris Thorne, barked. His gloved hands moved with swift precision. "She's hemorrhaging badly from a placental abruption, likely caused by the stress and trauma. We need to stop the bleeding, or we lose her." Melina's body, pale and still under the harsh lights, jolted as they used the paddles to restart her heart. The monitor steadied briefly, only to falter again. Dr. Thorne's jaw was tight. "She's not stabilizing. Prepare for an emergency C-section. We need to get the baby out now, if we have any chance of saving either of them." The air thickened with urgency. 2 lives now balanced on a knife's edge. Outside, Julian pressed his forehead against the cool glass, whispering like a prayer. "Hold on. please, hold on." Inside the haze of unconsciousness, Melina dreamed. She stood on a dark stage, the silence where a roar of applause should have been. A door opened in the distance, beckoning her toward a peaceful, empty darkness. But then another voice broke through. Julian's, steady and warm. "Fight, Melina. Fight for your child." She clutched her belly in the vision, feeling the faint kick of her unborn baby. A fragile life, still fighting. With a surge of will, she turned away from the darkness. On the operating table, her body responded. The monitor beeped with a stronger rhythm. "We've got a pulse," a nurse cried, but the fight wasn't over. Dr. Thorne worked quickly. Minutes felt like hours. Finally, a tiny, fragile form was lifted from Melina, but there was no cry, only a devastating silence. A pediatric team rushed the baby to a side station, their movements frantic. "No pulse, starting compressions." The room held its breath. The gentle, rhythmic pressure on the tiny chest, the hiss of the oxygen pump. Those were the only sounds. Julian, straining to see through the glass, saw a nurse shake her head, tears in her eyes. His heart shattered. After what felt like an eternity, the pediatric chief looked at the clock, his face etched with grief. Time of death. The surgeon's voice cracked slightly as he turned back to his team. "Focus on saving the mother. We can't lose her, too." And as the machines wailed again, Melina's body went limp. She was still bleeding, her life draining away. Dr. Thorne looked at his team, his eyes filled with a grim determination. The battle for Melina's life raged on, a desperate, bloody war against the darkness that threatened to consume her. While Melina fought for her life, Charles Boyd was escorted into a sterile holding room at a downtown LAPD station. His once perfect suit was torn, his tie hung loose, his hair matted with sweat and pool water. The world he had meticulously built was gone. Now his empire had shrunk to 4 grey walls and a metal table. He slammed his fists on the table, veins bulging in his neck. "This is a mistake," he bellowed to the empty room. "Do you have any idea who I am? I'm Charles Boyd." But no one came to listen. His phone had been confiscated, but even if he had it, the calls wouldn't have saved him. The headlines were already spreading across every news outlet like a virus. Real estate tycoon, Charles Boyd, forces pregnant wife into near-death spectacle. Clips from the party flooded social media. His cold commands, his violent outbursts, and Julian Croft's heroic rescue. The world that once praised him now spat his name with disgust. Investors began pulling out. Contracts collapsed. Lawsuits piled up at his door. Every bridge he had built with charm and manipulation burned in an instant. And worst of all, Isabella Vance had vanished. The woman who had whispered poison into his ear was gone. By morning, she had issued a statement to the press, her lawyers painting her as an innocent bystander, horrified by Charles's actions. "I was only there to support my dear friend Melina," the statement read. "I never knew Charles was capable of such cruelty." When a guard showed him the article, Charles threw his chair against the wall. "Liar!" he screamed, his voice cracking with rage. Sophia had abandoned the sinking ship, erasing any connection to his downfall. Meanwhile, Melina's image was rising from the ashes. Photos of Julian carrying her from the pool went viral, captioned with words of sympathy and outrage. Justice for Melina trended worldwide. The world that had forgotten her was now rallying behind her. Charles sat in the interrogation room, his world collapsing. He clenched his fists, his eyes narrowing with a venomous resolve. "This isn't over," he muttered. "She thinks she can run to him. She thinks she can rise again. No, I'll destroy them both. If I go down, I'm taking them with me." Hours later, In a quiet recovery room at Cedars-Sinai, Melina stirred. Machines beeped softly beside her bed. She was pale, her body frail, but alive. Julian sat at her side, refusing to leave. He had been there since she came out of surgery, a silent, unwavering vigil. Her lashes fluttered, her lips parted. Where am I?" she whispered. Julian leaned closer, his voice soft but steady. "You're safe, Melina. You're in the hospital. They saved you." Her eyes searched his face, struggling to piece together the memories. Slowly, it returned. The pool, the blood, the icy water, the pain. Fear flashed in her gaze. Her hand shot to her flat belly, trembling. "The baby?" she asked, her voice a fragile thread. "Where's my baby?" Julian's throat tightened. He had faced down corporate raiders and hostile governments without flinching. But this moment broke him. His voice cracked as he spoke the hardest words of his life. "Melina, I'm so sorry. The doctors, they couldn't save her." Her eyes widened, a universe of pain exploding within them. A sound tore from her throat, a raw, piercing cry of a mother's grief that shattered the quiet of the room. "No," she sobbed, clutching her stomach as if holding on to the emptiness. "No, please, no, I carried her. I sang to her. She can't be gone." Julian's own eyes burned. He reached for her, pulling her gently against his chest despite the wires and tubes. "I know, Melina," he whispered, his own grief a heavy weight in his chest. "I know. You didn't deserve any of this. But you're alive. You're still here. And I swear on my life, I will not let anyone hurt you ever again." Her sobs shook through him, heavy and endless. She buried her face against him, her tears soaking his shirt. For the first time in years, Melina Moore, the woman once adored by millions, was allowed to grieve, not as a star, not as a wife, but as a broken mother. And in that moment of shared sorrow, a bond was forged between them, a quiet promise made in the shadow of an unbearable loss. A few weeks later, Charles Boyd walked out of the courthouse, out on bail. Money and powerful lawyers had worked their dark magic, reducing the charges, twisting the narrative into a story of a man under extreme emotional distress. His smile for the cameras was forced, but his eyes held a chilling, unrepentant fire. He was not broken. He was dangerous. Julian had moved Melina from the hospital to a secure, private medical facility he owned in the tranquil hills of Malibu. The place was a fortress, but Melina's fear remained. "He won't stop, Julian," she whispered one evening, her hand trembling in his. "I know him. He can't accept losing." "Then let him come," Julian replied, his voice a low growl. "This time he won't be facing a frightened woman alone. He'll be facing me." His words were prophetic. Late one night, Charles made his final, desperate move. He sent 2 hired men to breach the facility's security, their orders clear: finish the job. But Julian was prepared. The attack was swift, brutal, and short-lived. Julian's security team, comprised of former Special Forces operatives, neutralized the intruders before they could even reach Melina's wing. The failed hit was the final nail in Charles's coffin. Caught on camera directing the attack via a recorded call, he was arrested again, his bail revoked. This time there would be no escape. The story then jumps forward 1 year. The trial was a media sensation. Charles Boyd, stripped of his power and polish, was sentenced to life in prison. His empire was seized and dismantled. Isabella Vance vanished into obscurity, a disgraced footnote in a story of ruin. Melina never attended the trial. She was in Carmel by the sea, living in a quiet, elegant home overlooking the Pacific Ocean. The crashing waves were a constant, soothing rhythm against the shore of her healing. The grief for her lost daughter, whom she had named Hope, was a permanent part of her, a quiet ache in her soul. But it no longer defined her. With Julian's steady, patient support, she had found her way back to herself. He never pushed, never demanded. He simply created a space where she could be safe enough to fall apart and then slowly piece herself back together. She was in therapy. She walked on the beach for hours. And, for the first time in years, she began to write music again. Her new songs weren't the bright, hopeful ballads of Melody Moore. They were deeper, richer, filled with the raw ache of loss, but also the fierce light of survival. Julian found her one afternoon sitting at the piano, a melody filling the house. He stood in the doorway, listening as she sang, her voice no longer just golden, but forged in fire. It was stronger, more authentic than it had ever been. When she finished, tears were streaming down her face, but she was smiling. That evening, a local charity for abused women was holding a fundraising gala. Julian was a major donor. He had asked Melina gently if she would consider attending. He never expected what she said next. "I'll go," she said, her voice clear, "and I want to sing." Standing on that small stage, in front of a few hundred people, Melina felt a familiar tremor of stage fright. But this time it was different. She looked out and saw not a sea of demanding fans, but a room of empathetic faces. She saw Julian in the front row, his eyes filled with a love so profound it gave her strength. She took a breath and began to sing. It was a new song, a lullaby for the daughter she never got to hold, a ballad of breaking and becoming whole again. Her voice soared, filled with every ounce of her pain, her resilience, her hope. The performance wasn't for fame or for applause. It was for herself. It was a declaration that she had survived, that she was free. When the last note faded, the room was silent for a moment, then erupted in heartfelt applause. Julian was on his feet, his face a mask of pride and love. Melina smiled, a true, radiant smile that reached her eyes. The nightmare was over. And a new life, bright, unbreakable, and finally her own, had just begun. Melina Moore's story is a powerful testament to the resilience of the human spirit. She was pushed into the darkest waters of betrayal and cruelty, but she refused to drown. Instead, she found the strength to surface, to breathe, and to reclaim her own voice. Her journey reminds us that no matter how deep the darkness, the dawn will always come. And true power isn't about controlling others. It's about owning your own survival. You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. If this story of turning scars into strength moved you, please give it a like. Share it with someone who needs a message of hope today. And don't forget to subscribe, because together we can prove that every voice deserves to be heard.